Hi, this is Dr. Khan. Welcome to the Ask Dr. Khan Show. You're just one whiteboard away from solving your health puzzle. Now today we're going to continue our Neurotransmitter series. Last week we talked about what are the different types of neurotransmitters, how are they made, what do they do, and how do you support it. So it was an epic episode. If you missed it, I encourage you to go back and watch last week's episode. Now today we're going to talk specifically about serotonin. Now serotonin also is called a 5-hydroxytryptamine or 5-HTP, and this is a neurotransmitter that's made throughout the entire body. And so it's made both in the central nervous system, and in the peripherally. Okay. So centrally is made primarily in the brain stem, in an area that's spread throughout the brainstem called the raphe nucleus. So this type of nucleus, or these type of neurons in the brainstem, make serotonin. So we're talking about serotonin here. And that's in the brain. Peripherally, 90% of your serotonin is made in the gut. Okay, so your gut makes a whole bunch of these, and then also other parts of the body need it as well. For example, your platelets actually uses neurotransmitter, and it helps controls vasoconstriction, so it can control your blood pressure to some degree. Also your kidney uses it to help excrete sodium. So again, it can control your electrolytes and blood pressure. And then obviously in the gut, it controls gut motility, which helps you with peristalsis, help you move food through so you don't get constipated. So it's made both in the brain, and also what's made in the brain gets sent out to the spinal cord as well, and to the cortex, and to have some function on pineal gland. So in the cortex, obviously it's going to affect mood. In the pineal gland, it's going to affect the production of melatonin. In fact, melatonin, your pineal gland takes serotonin and converts it into melatonin. So it can affect sleep. And in the spinal cord, the serotonin, when it gets sent into the spinal cord, can help modulate pain control. So some people with fibromyalgia may have a serotonin deficiency, lack of ability to dampen pain at the spinal cord level, because your serotonin is your natural pain blocker, so to speak. So you can see that it's made both in the brain and peripherally. Now it's important to know that what's made in the periphery doesn't necessarily cross the blood-brain barrier. It doesn't cross into the brain. So what's made in the brain stays in the brain, kind of like Vegas, right? What happens in the brain stays in the brain, and what happens in the gut typically stays in the gut. So when we're doing these neurotransmitter testing, typically it's measured through urine, and what that's measuring is typically peripheral levels. And that's not necessarily telling you how much is in the brain per se, okay? But we can get an idea. Really what's most important is be able to take a great history, asking relevant questions of what are the symptoms, why do you have these problems? So today we're going to talk about some of the mechanism for why you may have this issue. Okay, let's start with the symptoms of serotonin problem. And you're going to see it's quite a list here. So the list of serotonin symptoms include loss of pleasure in hobbies and interests. In general, you're going to see a lot of these loss of enjoyment. Basically, when you don't have enough serotonin, you don't enjoy things. Things you used to love, you no longer like them anymore. So you lose pleasure in activities or hobbies that you used to like, you just don't seem to enjoy them anymore. You feel overwhelmed with ideas to manage, you get overwhelmed really easily. You feel the sense of inner rage and unprovoked anger. You get you snap easily, okay? You also get this feeling of paranoia. You get like paranoid. You get feelings of sadness for no reason. I should say no reason. Meaning that you don't have any reason to be sad. Your life is great, but yet you feel sad. You lose enjoyment in life. Everything looks blue to you. you lack artistic appreciation. You listen to music, you're just like, you used to love that, and now you just like don't really get any enjoyment out of that. Feeling of sadness when it's overcast, so can be affected by weather, so seasonal affective disorder. When it's overcast, you get depressed. That may be related to a serotonin issue. You lose enthusiasm for your favorite activity. You lose enjoyment of your favorite food. Food just don't taste great to you. I mean, it still tastes the same, but you don't enjoy it. You may lose enjoyment in friendships and relationships, so you become a recluse. You don't want to go out. Inability to fall into deep, restful sleep. You don't sleep well. You may have feelings of dependency on others. And also, you're more susceptible to pain. So these symptoms, again, are just symptoms. The way you address these problems is by understanding how this thing is made, where does it come from, and where does it go, and what are the things that can affect it. If you can do that, you're going to be able to treat the root cause instead of just, okay, what do I take for this? It's not about what you take for it, it's about what's causing the problem. So let's talk about production, okay? So how is this thing made? So to make serotonin, first, it starts with protein consumption, either from vegetable protein or animal protein, protein consumption. Remember we talked about last week, you got to have protein to break it down into amino acids. So here you're going to break down into what's called branch chain amino acid, or BCAA. So when you eat protein, it's going to break down to amino acids, specifically these specific types. And then what happens is this is going to stimulate insulin. It's going to stimulate insulin release, and what's going to happen is this is going to start to shift the ratio of the BCAA to tryptophan ratio. So what happens is this amino acid and these amino acids, they compete with each other. They compete with each other for this amino acid called this transporter called a large neutral amino acid transporter. So this is like the bus that's going to take tryptophan into the brain. But the problem is the insulin affects the ratio of these things. And in fact, these BCAA tend to get absorbed when you have high insulin level really quickly. So what happens is when BCAA gets absorbed, then you have a lot of tryptophan just floating around. And that's going to make more of these try to go through to the brain, and this can cause problems. So let me continue. So these large amino acid transporters, or LNAA, will next bind to tryptophan. So when this binds to tryptophan, now it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier. So this is very much affected by blood sugar. So if you have blood sugar dysfunction, it's going to throw this off. Okay? Now once this gets into the brain, then the tryptophan can actually be converted to 5-HTP. Okay? And the 5-HTP gets converted to serotonin. Now, this process requires enzymes. So we have this tryptophan hydroxylase. So tryptophan hydroxylase, which is an enzyme that's going to do this step right here. And this step is dependent on iron. Let me use a different color. It's iron dependent. Of course, that's dead. This step requires iron. So if you have anemia, you can't carry this step forward. So it doesn't matter how much tryptophan or turkey you eat, you're not going to be able to convert that from tryptophan into 5-HTP. The step here requires another enzyme, and this enzyme is the long word AARD. It stands for aromatic amino acid decarboxylase. And what happens is this step right here, this enzyme, requires several cofactors, requires pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which is vitamin B6. This step also requires niacinamide, also requires B12 in a methylated form, so methylcobalamin. It also requires methylfolate, and then also need a little bit of magnesium. So these are the cofactors for this step right here, and this is the cofactor for this step. So you can see this is a very much a nutrient-driven process. So if you have deficiency of B6 or niacin or methylcobalamin, B12, or you have deficient methylfolate, the B12 folate, whether it's due to just not able to absorb it, or you have MTHFR, which will compromise if you have SNP of the MTHFR, a mutation of this gene, really it's not a mutation, it's a single nucleotide polymorphism, then you're going to have trouble absorbing methylfolate, then that step can be compromised due to deficiency. Or you have magnesium deficiency due to absorption problem, lack of stomach acid. So typically it's not the deficiency of that nutrient per se, it's just that you can't absorb it. Okay, so what I'm trying to show you here is that it's a step, right? You have steps. And it starts with the ability to even absorb or eat the protein, and then absorb and break down the protein, right? So this depends on gastric, HCl, and pancreatic enzymes, right? You have to be able to digest it. Maybe leaky gut can be affecting this at this step. Now you get the amino acid, you have to have proper insulin function. So here's the situation. If you have low blood sugar or high blood sugar, both will cause insulin surges. What that means is your insulin level, your pancreas is going to make insulin like this. It's going to shoot out a bunch of insulin, it's going to stop. It's going to squirt out a bunch of insulin, it's going to stop. Your insulin level is going to be like a roller coaster. Your body hates that because this will bust your LNAA, which is this guy right here. It'll break that, and now you're going to have a serotonin dysregulation. Because your brain don't like serotonin up, down, up, down. As the insulin goes up and down, so does your large neutral amino acid transporter go up and down, so does your insulin go up and down, or serotonin go up and down. So what happens is you're just getting surges of this, and that's why some people feel, like almost like bipolar, right? Bipolar means that you change from being manic, depressed to manic, right? You go super high to super low. Why? Because you're surging serotonin up and down. It's uncontrolled. So your brain hates that. You want to keep it steady. Keeping your blood sugar steady is the priority in people with serotonin issues. So all these symptoms you see here, and everybody want to take a pill for it, and the Western medical doctor want to give you a medication for it, but nobody's asking the root cause and making lifestyle change when you could just eat better and stabilize your blood sugar. That's the first step. And then we got to rule out these other problems, and that's how you're going to be able to balance this thing. Okay. Now, I want to also take a second to talk about how you break down serotonin, because there's some enzyme involved here as well. Let's see if I have enough room here. So, serotonin catabolism means break down. So once you make serotonin, you don't use all of it. So a lot of these things have to be broken down, because if you don't break down the serotonin, too much is going to hang around in your synaptic cleft. It's going to overstimulate your neurons. You're going to get all crazy and unstable, and the neuron's going to die from overstimulation. So much of the serotonin your body makes does not get utilized. It gets either reuptake, meaning your body recycles it, or it's got to be broken down, so you kill it. So it's not just floating around. So that process is done through an enzyme called a monoamine oxidase. Now, why is that important? Because there's a class of drug called the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, or MAO inhibitors. So this enzyme breaks down serotonin. So if you inhibit it, that means you stop this enzyme from breaking down serotonin, so more serotonin will hang around. You say, well, that's good, right? Well, that's good, depends. Now, if you have a serotonin deficiency, you just feel so depressed. If you have more serotonin start to hang around, you're going to feel a little bit better. But the way you do it is important, because if you take this drug, this drug or this enzyme not only break down serotonin, it also break down dopamine and norepinephrine. So if you take a drug that breaks this or stop it from breaking down serotonin, it's also going to stop its breakdown of dopamine and norepinephrine. Then all those neurotransmitters are just you're going to have way too much of it. And remember, in neurotransmitter physiology, the receptor is just as important as the neurotransmitter. Right? We have the neurotransmitter, but we also have the receptor. What that means is the neurotransmitter's got to dock with the receptor, and you have way too much neurotransmitter hanging around. What happens, the receptor is going to shut down. It's like a flow valve. If you have way too much, your body in its innate wisdom knows how to control this stuff. So the receptor on the cell surface, on the neuron's cell membrane, will shut down, kind of like a valve that's going to shut down to let less come in, because it already had way too much. So it's going to downregulate. When the receptor downregulates, what that means is doors shut, no more can come in. So now you have all this neurotransmitter floating around in the blood, but nothing's going into the cell. So you feel this depressed symptom, even though you have way too much. That's what the drugs do a lot of times. It causes this problem, and what happens over time, the receptor just stays shut. So what happens is you get resistant to the drug. So now you need to take higher level of drug just to shove more neurotransmitter into this door that's shut. You might be able to get some in, you feel a little bit better, but then it stops working for you because of this receptor problem. So the drug does that, and that's why you want to know this. There's a class of drug that's aimed at increasing serotonin level by not letting it break down, but you get a lot of side effect for it. In fact, now this is not considered first-line therapy. They're going for the SSRI, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, because you're blocking the reuptake. Remember, you make the neurotransmitter, your body recycle it. If you can let it not recycle, then more is going to hang around. But again, you're running into the same problem where you're messing with receptor activity, and you're going to eventually cause resistance, and it may no longer work anymore. Most people taking these SSRIs still have these depression symptoms despite taking the medication. Why? Because underlying root cause not addressed. Blood sugar, anemia, nutrient deficiencies. Not to mention here, really, these are the nutrients needed for the step, but things can also break this. Things can break it. Cytokines. Cytokines means inflammation. If you're inflamed, it's going to break these enzymes from working. So it may not be a nutrient deficiency, and maybe there's some kind of toxicity. If you have chemical toxicities, like heavy metal toxins or inflammation, that can also break this, in addition to being a nutrient deficiency. So the goal is always to identify the root cause. Now, once this breaks it down, it's going to break down to an intermediary step called 5-hydroxy indole acetaldehyde. Long word. But the next step is going to break it down into another chemical, the final chemical, which is called short for 5-HIAA. Now, why is that important? Because this chemical is something that can be measured in the urine. This is the final breakdown compound of serotonin. It breaks down into 5-HIAA. So you can actually do urinary testing to measure how much of this you have. Now, measuring this, what does that tell you? It just tells you how much of this you have in your urine, but then you have to make the correlation. Okay, why do you have too much of this or not enough of this? If you don't have enough of this, and maybe that not enough is being broken down, maybe a problem with this enzyme, or maybe you don't have it in the first place. If you have too much of it, it may be that this enzyme's not working, or you had too much. So it could be any scenario. Again, it's all about correlating the test result with what's going on with you, and then looking at other markers, not just serotonin by itself or 5-HIAA by itself, but looking at these other pathways where things can go wrong. If you understand this, this will help. And that's why I do what I do, and I put this all together. This is just one small piece, serotonin piece. Remember, through my videos, I talk about leaky gut, I talk about blood sugar, I talk about detoxification, I talk about genetics. All of that play a role into this. So don't ever make a mistake of using an isolated number and evaluate serotonin in an isolated manner by itself, always correlated with a bigger picture of all the other neurotransmitter. So for example, could you have serotonin symptom at the same time having dopamine deficiency symptom, at the same time having GABA deficiency symptom? Can you have more than one neurotransmitter that's broken? Yes, you can. If you do, what does that mean? Does that mean you don't have all of these neurotransmitter, or does that mean there's some global problem, meaning inflammation perhaps, or anemia that's blocking you from making any neurotransmitter? So you have to, again, look at the big picture to see the forest, not just a tree. If you're just looking at serotonin by itself, you're going to miss the big picture. Again, talking about serotonin, this can affect not just brain function as far as depression, lack of enjoyment. Definitely this can rock people's quality of life. If you're having these symptoms, please get help. We can help you. Nutrition and root cause may be a way to help you. It doesn't mean you stop your antidepressant today, but if you're taking an antidepressant and you're not getting any better, you may need to look at the root cause. If you or someone you love is struggling with depression, there's answers, there's hope for you. It's not just drugs, and it's not just about taking a pill or a supplement. It's about identifying the root cause. Serotonin deficiency not only can cause cognitive symptoms, can also cause insomnia due to its effect on pineal gland's production of melatonin, because serotonin is what the pineal gland uses to turn into melatonin, so it can affect sleep. Serotonin is also used in the spinal cord to block pain. So this can cause people to have increased pain sensation, sensitivity to pain, chronic pain, or even fibromyalgia. Serotonin is also used in the gut to help with gastric motility so that you can actually push food through. So this can cause problem with constipation. And then if you're constipated, food sits there and starts to ferment, you get dysbiosis. Now you may have SIBO, you may have candida, and these things don't ever go away, not because you caught the candida or you caught SIBO, it's because your brain's not functioning right because you can't make serotonin. That's a possibility. So if you like this video, please like and share this video with those who you know is struggling with chronic mood and depression and pain, because they need the answers. Please share this video with them. And also please subscribe to my YouTube channel to continue to follow along with this series on neurotransmitter. And please like our Facebook page. And I'll put all the links to our information here. And if you need help, always, please call us at 480-988-6269 to schedule an appointment with us so that we can guide you through this process so you're no longer confused and you start to have clarity. You're no longer frustrated. You start to feel empowered because someone cares about you. Someone's going to walk you through with this type of information and plug you into this so that you actually start to get answers. So please give us a call, 480-988-6269, or you can go to our website at askdrkong.com to get started. We'll see you next week at the Ask Dr. Kong Show.